Welcome to the Food Junkies Food Addiction Summit.
Here we aim to provide you with the experience, strength, and hope of professionals actively working on the front lines in the field of food addiction.
The purpose of this summit is to educate you and increase overall awareness about food addiction as a disease with abstinence as the solution.
Every day for the month of October, we are sharing one inspiring speaker or highlighted food preparation video from the incredible Tony Vassallo of Moda Nutrition Inc. and the Real Food Revival Movement.
We have 4 weeks of interviews with the leaders in the field of food addiction, clinicians who are working on the front lines, registered dietitians and nutritionists that are working toward bridging the eating disorder and food addiction camps, and people just like you and me.
Here we talk about all things food addiction recovery. Most importantly, how to thrive rather than just survive.
So stay positive, make a change for yourself, tell others about your change, and hopefully the message will spread.
And as Vera always says,
the power is ours. Okay. Welcome to the Food Junkies Summit. This is the month when the Food Junkies team puts a concerted effort to fight the sugar demon during one of the hardest months of the year, namely October, when sugar is celebrated and crowned on the eve of Halloween. So we're going to, today I'm speaking with Chef AJ, who is a favorite guest of mine. She is an accomplished chef in the plant-based vegan world. If you don't know who she is already, she has a YouTube channel with tons of information on basically different types of foods that a person can eat. She runs an annual healthy living summit. She's the author of the book Unprocessed: The Secret to Ultimate Weight Loss. I love speaking to Chef AJ because she lives the life and understands implicitly the concept of food addiction recovery. And she's also in the plant-based vegan world. And normally in the food addiction world, the keto people kind of take over. But I'm really happy when Chef AJ speaks because it brings in that there's a whole other contingent of people who need to hear the same message. And Chef AJ holds it well. So welcome.
Thank you so much. You're one of my favorite educators.
Right on. Thank you. Well, actually, that leads us to our my first question. In this summit, we have it kind of divided into people who are just recovering food addicts, people who are clinicians, and people who are sort of food coaches and whatnot. And I was trying to fit where you fit in because you have a long and varied history. You've been around for a while. So where would you place yourself? A food coach? I mean, your background is being a chef. Tell me where you place yourself.
Well, I would probably I don't really have letters by my name like PhD or MD. I actually have 4 letters, CMIS, Certified Memory Impairment Specialist, because for years before becoming a chef, I worked in assisted livings and nursing homes, but that doesn't really do anything with the work you're talking about. But I would call myself a health coach because really what I try to do is educate people about the dangers of processed food. So I think I'm a health coach.
Okay. And you've been, like I said, you've been around for quite a while, and I think that there's been an evolution of the type of work that you've done. And this a bit of time that we're sharing together, I'm more interested in not about the science, because we're covering that in our podcast and it's going to be covered elsewhere. This summit is really to learn the sort of lived experience of each of the people. So I'm interested in your evolution of how you started. Like, when did, I don't know if you want to start from why you wanted to become a chef, but
I didn't become a chef until I was 43 years old.
Okay,
Almost 20 years ago.
Give us the thumbnail.
I actually wanted to become a veterinarian, and it's funny because it was trying to become a veterinarian that I became a vegetarian. And it's kind of funny because that's really what I wanted to be. I actually went to the University of Pennsylvania, and when I was 17, the very first day of the job, the doctor that I worked for, a veterinarian, handed me a tank of live salamanders and said, "I need you to cut their heads off." And I'm like, "Why?" He goes, "Well, because we're doing protein lens regeneration experiments in the amphibian, and we only need the eyes." Now, I'm a pretty squeamish person. I can't even look when I'm getting a shot, and that's the last thing I wanted to do was cut the head off an animal. But I was on scholarship. I was afraid. So I did it once and I puked my guts out. It was such a horrible experience. And I said to God that day, I'll never harm another creature again. So I became an instant vegan on September 1st, 1977 at the age of 17 for ethical reasons. So I joke that I went to Ivy League school. Instead of becoming a veterinarian, I became a vegetarian. So it wasn't that I wanted to become a chef. I actually did enjoy cooking. I got an easy bake oven for Hanukkah when I was 7 years old. But the reason I went to culinary school late in life when I was 43, almost 20 years ago, was because I had been a vegan for 26 years. And then in 2003, after 26 years being vegan, when I was 43 years old, I woke up bleeding profusely after using the restroom. And it turned out that I had my colon riddled with what they call precancerous polyps. Now, the vegan diet didn't protect me because I wasn't on a whole food diet. I was on a junk food vegan diet for 26 years. Because remember, I became vegan for ethical reasons. I wasn't concerned about the environment in 1977 or even my health, even though I was obese. And so what happened is I had gone to get the polyps removed and they couldn't because my colon was in such a state of disarray. And the doctor said, well, you're going to have to come back and have surgery to remove these. And I am afraid of doctors, anesthesia, medication, because as a teenager, I once had what was supposed to be a same-day operation. Turned out I was allergic to the anesthetic. Not only did I almost die, but I almost ended up on a ventilator. So I tried to avoid doctors whenever possible. And that's when I first learned that there's actually a connection between what we eat, how we look, how we feel, what diseases we can get, and ultimately what diseases we can reverse. So instead of going in and having my colon cut open, I went to a place in Lemon Grove, California, near San Diego, called the Optimum Health Institute. And it's the first time in my life that anyone, let alone doctors and nurses and other clinicians, said that what you eat has a profound effect on your life. And it was amazing because no doctor ever asked me what I ate or told me what I was eating was wrong. I mean, I knew I had a sugar addiction. I can tell you a funny story about that in a moment, but it was just eye-opening. And then instead of eating a junk food vegan diet, which was with what I was eating, I was having Coke Slurpees for breakfast with 8 pumps of vanilla syrup. And I mean, what 43-year-old has, Slurpees for breakfast, regular Dr. Pepper, big gulps for lunch, the 48-ounce size, because back in the day, they didn't have that 256-ounce size with free refills. And I was eating vegan candies, cakes, cookies, pies, and ice cream, but everything I was eating was junk. It was processed. It was inflammatory. There were no whole foods. There were no fruits and vegetables in my diet. So is it a wonder that I ended up with pre-colon cancer? Well, I don't think so. I don't think that's an accident.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I followed the diet instead of the junk food vegan diet, but of whole plants, in their whole food form as found in nature, not the way they're processed in a plant. And 6 months later, I went back to the same gastroenterologist. I had another they didn't do a colonoscopy, they did a sigmoidoscopy, but still, he said that all my polyps were gone, that my colon was clear, clean, pink, and vascular like a newborn baby. And he said, well, where did you have the surgery? I'm like, I didn't have surgery. He goes, well, then where are the polyps? I have photos of every single one in their size. And I said, well, I just changed my diet. He goes, well, that's impossible. And he storms out of the room, and the assisting GI doctor, who I believe was from India, said, I believe you. And I knew right then and there, it's like Oprah talks about the light bulb moment, that food is a big deal. It's either the best medicine or the worst poison. And then my life changed. And so the only reason I became Chef AJ was because I knew if I was going to eat healthy, it had to taste better than the food, the sprouts, and the things that I was getting at the Optimum Health Institute. So it wasn't that I was trying to be a chef. I was trying to be a veterinarian, but instead I became Chef AJ. And I'm glad I did, because I think I not only helped myself heal, but I've helped other people find the road to recovery.
Yeah. So basically, your aha moment was realizing that just being a vegetarian, which what you did on ethical reasons, was not good enough. You had to actually look at the foods that you were eating, make sure that they were fully unprocessed and healthy foods, and then you realized you had to make those tasty so that it would be sustainable. And so that's where you became a chef. Was basically, how do I make these foods sustainable?
Right. How do I make it taste good so that it can be sustainable? Because so many people go on a diet, and people can withstand deprivation for a short time. But if whatever you're doing, whether it's to lose weight or get healthy, if it's not permanent, it wouldn't be sustainable. And I knew that the diet that was so austere from the Optimum Health Institute, which was very good from healing from cancer, would not be something I could sustain. So you're absolutely right. Because, a vegan diet can be completely processed and junk, like the one, you can have potato chips, you can have French fries, you can have soda, you can have cotton candy. So vegan in itself doesn't mean healthy, but plant exclusive, whole, because here's the thing, I was not eating any fiber, none. And fiber is only found in plants, not in processed plants and not in animal products. So once I started increasing my fiber and water, things started getting better.
Okay, and so then the kind of food that you were starting to make palatable or understand how to make palatable, can you give an example for somebody who's going, well, what do you mean by that? Just give an
Yeah, oh,
example.
exactly. Like Brussels sprouts, for example. I never ate vegetables till I was 43. And it's so funny because I was wearing this shirt. I brought this to show you because really my message at the end of the day is just to stop eating crap and start eating veggies. It's my favorite shirt. I never ate vegetables and I certainly didn't eat Brussels sprouts because I didn't like the way they smelled. To me, they smelled like gym socks. And like, I'm like, I can't eat gym socks. But when you find ways to prepare food, you can make things that you don't even think you like delicious. And so a lot of it has to do with what you put on them, but also cooking methods. So of course, if you boil some Brussels sprouts, they're not going to taste that great. But if you use a machine called an air fryer or even roast them in the oven, we're changing the entire integrity of the vegetable, the taste when you roast vegetables, you bring out the sweetness that caramelizes them, they become delicious. And I like to use marinades, not with oil or salt or sugar, but with a very good quality reduced balsamic vinegar mixed with a little mustard. It makes the Brussels sprouts taste like candy. Vegetables that I already love, for example, like broccoli, you put them in the air fryer, it's magical. So there are ways to prepare foods that you think you don't like or don't like very much and actually make them mouth-watering. But still, you need exposure. I was actually talking to a pediatrician today saying it takes a child about 15 times to be offered a new food. So she said, if you give your child broccoli and they turn their head, you don't say the child doesn't like broccoli. You wait 3 days and offer it again and you keep offering it. And it's the same thing. I, like a child at the age of 43, had to learn to love vegetables if I wanted to, not die from cancer. And now I love vegetables. I start my day with them. I eat them for breakfast. And to me, they are candy.
Yeah, and so your YouTube videos, your book, all of that stuff is essentially doing exactly what you're saying right now, showing people, walking people through.
I do have a different tangent that I've taken since the pandemic where I have like an interview style show, but yes, there's so many videos where I show you how to cook and how to make food taste delicious. Every Wednesday I do a new cooking video.
Yeah. Okay. So you're still doing that, and you've got your book, and so before this, because we're talking like that was when you were 40, early 40s, and I'm assuming that was at least a decade ago.
I'm 60. By the time this summit comes out, I'll be 61 and a half.
Okay, all right. So in the last 20 years, then I'm assuming initially you actually walked people through how to do this sort of thing, right?
Oh, absolutely. I became a culinary instructor even before I went to culinary school because I love teaching. And I started teaching at a culinary school in Santa Monica 3 years before going to culinary school. And I really still haven't stopped because I love teaching people how to cook because I feel it's doable. Teaching people how to not be a food addict, that could be really hard. But teaching people how to cook, I can demystify that and I can make it easy. I used to call my classes Healthy Made Delicious because I took things that were really healthy, like kale, that people didn't like, and I made them really delicious.
Healthy Made Delicious. I like that. Okay. And so you went from that to what you're doing now. So tell me a little bit about that arc.
Yeah. So I had my own journey with food addiction and weight loss. And once I kind of feel like, not to be religious, but like Moses goes up to the to Mount Sinai and he's handed the 10 commandments. I kind of feel like that happened to me, and it happened late in life, and I wasn't even looking for it. What happened is when I was 51 years old, I went to a place called the True North Health Center in Santa Rosa, California, where I actually have been working part-time, at least during the holidays, the last 10 years. And I met Dr. Alan Goldhammer and Dr. Doug Lyle, the co-authors of The Pleasure Trap. And I was going there for an entirely different reason that had nothing to do with food addiction or weight loss. But while I was there, I learned really what I call the truth about weight loss. And I implemented what they told me. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't obese and it wasn't difficult. Wow. And once I learned this, it's like I wanted to share it with the world, but I didn't realize that for many people, this was going to be too difficult. Like I just thought, well, I could do it. This is what you do. So knowing what to do and being able to implement it, I'm learning are two different things, but I still think knowledge is power. And that's what I want to do is I want to share the knowledge. If people can do it, great. If they can't, who knows, maybe one day later, they'll be able to do it.
So what was the extra piece that Dr. Goldhammer and the clinic True North gave you? So you knew about health, nutrition helped your colon, but something helped you lose weight. So what was the next step? Really,
one of the things they both taught, and this is based on the work of a researcher at Penn State University, Dr. Barbara Rolls, is a theory of calorie density, which is not dieting, which is not counting calories. They really explained to me what food is in terms of calorie density and how much a person needs to eat and things like stretch receptors, nutrient receptors, calorie receptors. And I found out that even though I was eating what people might consider healthy food, because I remember I was already not eating sugar and flour when I came to that. And I'm like,
Yes.
I'd still be 50 pounds overweight. Well, guess what? Peanut butter. Peanut butter might be a natural food. You might be able to make it in your kitchen, but it's like 3,000 calories a pound, whereas fruit is 300 calories a pound. So they taught me about the different relative calorie densities of food, things like that, for example. But Dr. Goldhammer really understands addiction and food addiction. And he explained that some of the things that I was adding to my food or in my recipes, things, and I wasn't actually adding them in the same form that we think of like as processed sugar, oil, and salt, but adding too much fat, adding too much salt, adding too much sugar, these make foods hyper palatable. And they explained about this whole dopamine reward cascade, that when food is of a high caloric density, like peanut butter, like oil, like cheese, we tend to like it more because it releases more dopamine in the brain. And that people actually become addicted to this artificial release of dopamine from eating these unnatural foods that aren't found in nature. And so when I got back to basics, eating foods that were found in nature, fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and legumes, and no longer including processed food, even if they were, quote, healthy, my weight really stabilized very quickly, and I haven't struggled in 10 years.
So can you give me an example of a calorie dense in the context of what you're talking about meal, just like a lunch? What would a lunch look like?
So my food is calorically dilute. And so what I do is, this is on the back cover of my book, and I have like this little caloric density magnet.
Okay,
And
cool.
the foods in greens are things that are found in nature. The foods in red are processed food. So let's just give you a really easy example, because I know both of us, we don't promote flour. Well, here's the thing. Flour is like 1,500 calories a pound, but the whole grain from the flour that it was made from is only 500 calories a pound. So in other words, whenever you process a food, whether it's corn into oil or olives into oil or beets into sugar or grains into flour, you are greatly increasing the caloric density. You're making it now calorie rich, but nutrient poor, because you've either disrupted or removed the fiber and the water.
Yeah.
And the most important thing that people have to remember, especially if they're trying to lose weight, is satiety matters. And if you don't have food that has fiber and water together, you're never going to feel satiated, because it's fiber and water together that creates bulk. So for example, let's take dried fruit, for example. I don't think dried fruit is necessarily unhealthy, but it's 1,300 calories a pound for raisins, whereas grapes are only 200 calories a pound. When you remove water, you increase caloric density. When you remove fiber, you increase caloric density, but you also decrease satiety. And that's why when I look at food now, I don't just say, is it from a plant, but is it from a whole plant with the fiber and water intact? And so that's how I look at things, that eating things in their whole food form rather than processing them.
Give me an example of a lunch.
So like, actually, I just had lunch. I had my favorite lunch, which is, it's a type of sweet potato that are often called Hannah yams, or they're white sweet potatoes. And I roasted them, and I had it with about a pound of broccoli, and I'm full and I'm happy, and all my dopamine circuitry is working great. It's my favorite meal. And I try to have that as often as possible. And in terms of calories, I don't know, sweet potatoes are 365 calories a pound. So maybe that was a pound and a half, and 150. So it was like a 650 calorie lunch, but it was a ton of food.
Yeah, I know. A pound of what was it, broccoli?
Pound of broccoli, because I follow Dr. Roll, so it's called volumetrics, where I can eat large quantities of food, but because they're calorically dilute and nutrient rich, I don't gain weight, and I feel very satisfied. Some people are more volume eaters, and people vary in the sensitivity of their stretch receptors. So for example, somebody that had gastric bypass probably couldn't eat like me, because I love being able to eat a lot and still being able to be healthy and not overweight. And I didn't know this before, because instead I would eat little portions of very high calorie food, which isn't very satisfying.
Can I just ask you a personal question then? Do you get bloated with all of that? I mean,
well, I don't. I mean, when I was first changing my diet from Coke Slurpees to vegetables, I did. Because, the microbiome takes time to adjust. But because I've been eating this way pretty much, at least since 2008, I don't. And it doesn't mean I never get bloated. Usually I find that my bloat is related to more emotional stress when that happens. But on a daily basis, I don't.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you for letting me ask you that. Okay, so now you mentioned food addiction in there, and that's what we're mainly interested in. So when did the aha moment come for that? Was that with in this clinic with Goldhammer?
It's so funny, because they didn't really use the word food addict there, or sugar addict. I did not learn about food addiction, I want to say till 2012, which was, I think was the year after I got there. And I learned about it from, and gosh, I wish I could meet him to tell him, believe it or not, from Denzel Washington. And it was kind of a funny story. I don't know him, but I think he's a terrific actor. And he did a movie called Flight. I don't know if you're familiar.
Yeah, I remember that.
So it was the same year that Daniel Day-Lewis won the Oscar for Lincoln. But if that wasn't the case, I think he would have won. So he plays this airplane pilot named Whit Whitaker that is a drug addict and an alcoholic. And I don't want to ruin the movie for you, but I might have to explain why this movie made such a difference in my life, because it was through watching this movie that I actually Googled food addiction, because I realized that I was one, a food addict, at least a sugar addict. So in this movie, he is fighting for his life, basically, because he's up on trial the next day because the plane did crash. It turns out the plane, he was high when he flew, but it crashed because there was something wrong with the plane. But that said, you really don't want your airplane pilot feeling on cocaine and alcohol. Not a great thing. So he has to give this critical testimony. And so there's guards watching his hotel door, room door, so he doesn't sneak out and drink, because this is so important. So in the movie, he's in the hotel room, and of course they can bring up room service food. And it turns out the room that's next door is open. Sometimes hotels rooms have adjoining rooms. And he goes in the other room, and the minibar in that room, because that's not his room, wasn't cleared out. So he goes in the minibar, and you see a close-up of his hand grabbing a vodka bottle, and he unscrews the top, and you're like, oh, please don't drink, please don't drink. And then he puts the bottle down. And then he takes his hand, and there's this close-up where he drinks, and then, all bets are off. And I'm like, I don't know why that scene sent chills down my spine, but it reminded me of how I used to be with sweet foods. I used to be a pastry chef, which, by the way, if you're an obese sugar addict, that is not the best job for you. But I used to always hide desserts in my freezer. Hide meaning because I was trying not to eat it, but they would be in the freezer. And I remember just like his hand opening and closing the vodka bottle, I would open and close the freezer, open and close. But guess what? The freezer always won. In other words, my hand always went in there. And I never didn't eat that food.
What's your favorite phrase? If it's in the house, it's in your mouth.
If it's in your house, it's in your mouth. And that there are no exceptions to that rule, I promise you. And so then I said, you know what, even though I'm beginning to get healthy and I'm abstinent, this is what this feels like to me. And I started Googling food addiction and sugar addiction. I started meeting some of the type of people, not you yet, but other people that travel in your circles. And I started having consultations with them and learning more. And I realized, wow, this is really a thing. And nobody in the vegan or plant-based world is talking about it. And I wanted to be that voice, because I see so many people struggle on a vegan diet because they don't know this missing piece. And again, it's not everybody's a food addict. People like my husband, not that he chooses to eat these things, but he would be fine. He'd still be slender and healthy. He's the kind of person that could probably have a glass of champagne once in a while. He doesn't. But so many people in the plant-based world were suffering with excess weight and shame because they couldn't stop eating the foods, because nobody in the plant-based world seemed to want to talk about it.
So how has it been in that? I would assume that when you're talking to clients directly, you're going to have some pushback individually and also professionally. So what kind of pushback have you had, and how have you dealt with it?
Well, the thing is, the pushback that I've had that has been negative has been from people in the plant-based world that really want to get the ethical message out, which I think is really important, because I think animal suffering and the way they're treated in factory farms is horrible, because they don't like the fact that they say, oh, you're making it harder to be vegan if people have to be unprocessed. And I said, well, I'm making it people to be healthy, because if they're not healthy, it doesn't matter. So they don't like, because I'm not really bashing the vegan message, because I'm still an ethical vegan. But sometimes they don't like that I'm promoting the health message. Also, different people's programs include some of these products that we find addictive, things like flour products, sugar. And so people kind of are married to whatever it is they're teaching, and they don't really want to look at other aspects. And so what I say to people, and if people really listen to my work, they know I've said this since day one. And I mean this sincerely for everyone. Whatever program you do the least restrictive one that you can do, but that will get you the results you seek. So if you can do a more liberal vegan program with a little flour and sugar and are happy with your weight and your level of cravings and feel like you still have a calm, stable brain, I'm not going to tell you have to be abstinent. But if you're struggling and and you really want to get that weight off and you can't stop craving and you can't stop eating these foods, maybe a more abstinent-based program like the one that I eat and teach might be something you would consider looking at.
Yes, you're kind of presenting the solution without actually using the word food addiction or sugar addiction, which
Right.
I can see what you're saying now. If there's a larger picture of an ethics, people are going to say, don't scare people away from that. I get that. Yeah. But you're right. What's the point if they're sick? You know?
Exactly, because especially if you see, my feeling is if you're really that compassionate and really care that much about animals, you want to be the best you can be. You want to look your best and feel your best. And for some people, when they eat crap food, they don't look so good. They don't feel so good. And so, so I do get, here's the thing. And thank you for having me on the summit, because I feel like I fit in nowhere, because I don't really fit in the food addiction world, because I don't subscribe to weighing and measuring and eating animals. And I don't really fit into the plant-based world either. So I'm kind of like an island in a way.
Yeah.
So
well, I mean, I was actually going to ask you, because I was hoping that was changing. Are there more people coming around in the plant-based vegan world that are listening to this message?
Yes.
Because I'd like to be able to say in the Facebook group, I'm always saying, check out Chef AJ, but there's got to be more people.
No, there are. I believe that Dr. Alan Goldhammer definitely believes in food addiction, and Dr. Stefan Esser, he's a Harvard MD, he believes in it. Dr. Frank Sabatino, Dr. Scott Stoll, so Dr. Rosanne Alviera. So there are more and more, but they don't necessarily, that's not how they're hanging up their shingle. But when you talk to them, they absolutely believe that this is real. And the funny thing is we all eat the same way. Like they've never been overweight or suffered, but they still eat the way that I recommend, which is whole food.
Yeah. But you're one of the people that really brings that out. And that's, if I were to ask you what is unique about you, I think that's what it is.
Yeah, it's because I have a foot in both worlds. It's because I respect everything that the people that work with food addiction have brought to us in terms of the science, even though I may not agree with their food plan. And I respect everything the doctors in the plant-based world has done, even though I might not agree with their food plan. So what I'm trying to do is merge it for people that have fallen through the cracks because they want to be both. They want to be vegan, they want to be abstinent. And then they listen, but Dr. Joe says, Ezekiel bread is good. Yeah, it's good, but not if you're an overweight food addict.
Wow. Okay, so what are you doing now? So that was you were doing the sort of food plans based on the actual food, but now you call yourself an educator. So it sounds like you.
I think so, because I've been doing this. Well, I don't want to say a long time, but close to 15 years.
Yeah.
And when I lived in Los Angeles, I used to actually have this was really fun. Actually, I had groups come to my home, and we called it the 30-day unprocessed challenge, just because that people, as we've had this conversation. People don't love the word addict or being called an addict or being a food addict. Where basically for 30 days they would come to my home 4 consecutive Saturday nights, and I would give them education, meals. We'd have lectures by myself and some of the doctors that I just mentioned through Skype. And they would just as an experiment, not saying, look, you can never eat sugar or flour again, but for 30 days, we're going to just do this. And we'd had tremendous results with not only weight, but we'd have a phlebotomist come at the beginning and the end and do their blood, do their triglycerides and cholesterol, things like that. It was very, very gratifying. It was a small group, never more than 24 people. And the results were astonishing. And I've had people that I've worked with that have lost anywhere from 30 pounds to 300. Wow. People started hearing about the success on Facebook, and they wanted in, and I'm like, well, so that's when we started doing it and doing our programs online. And I think that when you have a problem like food addiction, which can have a lot of shame and guilt because people think like they're the only one that ever ate out of the trash can. Well, you're not. Don't worry about that. That when they're in a group of like-minded people, I think recovery is even quicker and more possible because they don't have to feel like they're alone. Because usually the people I work with, nobody gets them in their family. Their husband is either unsupportive or even sabotaging and doesn't want to eat this way. So now all the work that I do is in through educational classes or larger group coaching programs where people can actually connect and have accountability partners and be in a group, because it's also inspiring when they see that other people have had success. And even if you've had a slip or a relapse, you've got somebody there to pick you up. So I think for this particular problem, the groups are for most people the way to go.
Yeah, that's been my experience too. Groups are really, really helpful. And you did mention something about what you're doing now, that it's more interviewing. Can you elaborate a little bit?
Yeah. So it's I'm calling this my pandemic pivot. So I was making my living mostly as a speaker. I would be invited to places like spas in other countries, cruise ships, or medical conferences to either do demos or teach this concept, which is my favorite, which is called calorie density, which is brilliant, whether you're plant-based or not, just to understand what food composition. And of course, with the pandemic, all my jobs, they were gone. They were booked.
Can I just interrupt? Is that The Pleasure Trap? Is that the book that really covers that?
Oh, The Pleasure Trap, I'd love to get you. You know, I actually did the audio for The Pleasure Trap, but the book it's my second book called The Secrets to Ultimate Weight Loss. And this is where I do the whole chapter.
The calorie density.
It's on calorie density. And if you don't have it, I'm happy to send it to you, as well as The Pleasure Trap. And so I didn't know that eventually that a lot of these doctors were going to put their conferences online and I'd still be able to present and do cooking demos. And so what happened is I run a community of people and I'm not very tech savvy and I wanted to go live, just wishing everybody well with the pandemic. And instead of going live to my group, I ended up going live all over YouTube and Facebook. And there were like 500 people watching. And especially at the beginning of the pandemic, they wanted that connection. And I said, gosh, this is going to be boring, just me every day. So I called a bunch of friends and I've done 610 shows as of now since the pandemic. And I'm booked for 6 months ahead of time. So I go live every day at 11. It's called Chef AJ Live. And it's not just doctors, but it's often doctors. And really the theme of the show is people that are doing amazing things in the work that I think you should know about. So a lot of them are plant-based, but you don't have to be. You basically, to be on my show, you just have to be amazing.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Chef AJ. Okay, so you strike me as being quite successful in all of these endeavors that you've done. I mean, even from, the early days when you were still a vegan but obese. I mean, you were on Johnny Carson, for God's sakes.
Yeah. Well, that's getting back to my roots. That's the one gift of the pandemic is I've been able to get back into stand-up comedy performing because now. Oh my God. So I do enjoy that. That was my true roots. But yeah, when people think like you were really 60 pounds heavier. Yeah, just watch YouTube. I had a bad haircut too, but I really was. Yeah.
It was very funny. So really, can we look forward to seeing some stand-up comedy from Chef?
Yeah, I've been. It's on my YouTube channel. I do the shows for free on Zoom. Absolutely.
Oh my God, that's wonderful.
I do love comedy. I think you have to laugh, especially if you're an addict. You need to have some laughter.
So what would you say would be your number one secret to success in all that you've done? Because you've really done well in things that you've turned to.
Do you mean career-wise or with managing food addiction? Or both?
We could do both, actually. Yeah.
Yeah. So, one of the things that I learned from my mentor, Dr. Doug Lisle, one of the co-authors of The Pleasure Trap, and it was the very first thing he said to me in 2011 as a patient in True North. It wasn't even about weight loss. He was just giving a general lecture. And he said something that I never forgot, which is we must work harder on our environment than we do ourselves. Mm-hmm. And that is my job. And so as long as I control my environment, and that doesn't just mean not having crap food in the house, but my environment when it comes to stress and having a clean workspace and things like that, then I can pretty much control my life. And I find that the number one problem with the people that I work with is they are living in an unclean environment. And it would be very hard if you went to Betty Ford, which is actually close to where I lived, for rehab for drugs or alcohol. And then you get out and then okay, go back to work as a bartender now, but don't drink.
Yeah.
And this is the problem what I see with people with food addiction is they understand the concept of abstinence into that they are not supposed to have these things they think, but everybody else around them is eating them and they're buying them for their family and they're cooking them. And it's very difficult to abstain from something that is always in your face. And this has been talked about in recovery from a long time. I remember interviewing Dr. Frank Sabatino about that and saying that people in recovery, if they hear the tap tap of a razor blade on glass, they'll get cravings to use. And so if you're trying to abstain from sugar and flour and your husband is making toast every morning or crunching granola or eating chocolate chip cookies or chips, it's going to be very, very difficult. And there's nothing wrong with you because you're hardwired. And this again comes down to calorie density. We're designed to eat the most concentrated source of calories in the environment. And I have just found that, when environment is right, willpower is of no need. But when it is wrong, willpower is of no use because willpower is a very limited commodity. And every time you make a decision, you drain it. And if when you have an environment, an abstinent, clean environment, you can't hurt yourself with food. And if all you have is healthy food, you're going to eat it. You don't have to use willpower to make a decision to not eat something that isn't there. And I have found that really in the people I've worked with that have been successful long-term, not short-term, is the number one secret is to have a clean environment.
Can you just repeat that phrase again about the willpower?
When environment is wrong, willpower is of no use. When environment is right, willpower is of no need.
Yeah.
That's something I came up with because people say, I just need more willpower. I don't have any more willpower than any of you. I promise.
Absolutely.
What I have the two things that I think that have made me successful in terms of keeping this weight off and not having relapses is I have a clean environment and I do batch cooking. So that means, guess what? Whenever I'm hungry, I open the fridge and the salad is chopped and the vegetables are steamed and the potatoes are roasted. And so I just have a choice of nothing but whole, delicious, natural food at my feet.
You have a choice of 1 pound of Brussels sprouts or 1 pound of broccoli.
That's right. And that is the most difficult decision every day that I have to make.
Yeah. And that bit about willpower, it's true. We only have about 20 minutes of it in a day. And so your 20 minutes is used on, will it be Brussels sprouts or broccoli? Whereas, it just doesn't work beyond that. Yeah. I always teach people use that 20 minutes with recovery options as opposed to, in the face of something very difficult. Okay. So, is there anything else? I want to ask you where people can find you, and I want to ask you one other question. But before that, is there anything else that you're doing now that you'd like people to know about, or something that we can look forward to? I'm looking forward now, based on our conversation, on your stand-up. So is there
Well, I would love if they go to chefaj.com just to get on my mailing list, because one of the things I do, which you are always one of the experts, is called the Truth About Weight Loss Summit that happens around Valentine's Day every year, where we have about 40 of some of the best doctors and other healthcare professionals and even regular people just talk about this thing, because we call it weight loss because that draws people in, but really it is somewhat of a food addiction summit, because you can't really talk about one without the other. So that's one thing. And I do have a membership group if people want to try it out, just where we do like a Zoom every week with me or some of the doctors that I mentioned, where they answer questions, because I do like connecting people. I see myself as a connector of people, because I do think that helps people recover. And, I'm just here to teach an abstinent-based food plan if you're willing to hear me out, and I can make it delicious. And, abstinence isn't a sexy sell, Dr. Tarman. People just really want another way. It's funny. I remember when I was younger, Steve Martin was hosting the Oscars, and they always have the child of a celebrity as the one that hands the statuettes out. And I remember it was some gorgeous model, and he said, "Boy, I'd give anything to look like that, except for diet and exercise." And I think people would give anything to lose weight and not have to struggle with cravings and food addiction, except the abstinent. And people are always looking for an angle to continue the behavior, but get the result, and it doesn't work. And that's why I've been preaching abstinence is bliss for a long time, but until people can experience what we experience, they can't believe that it's even possible.
I think that's really the key thing is, we have to, like you said, abstinence is bliss. Like it is actually it is not an experience of deprivation, except maybe for the first 10 days. It's actually easier and it's more pleasant. And so your books and your YouTube, and you're basically showing how abstinence is bliss.
It is so much harder. I mean, this whole idea that, first of all, moderation has not worked, at least in the United States, because if it did, we wouldn't have an obesity rate of 40%. Right. And an overweight of over 70%. And it's not that moderation can't work for some people like my husband, but if you're a food addict or any kind of addict or overweight, clearly it hasn't worked for you. And if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always gotten. So, people, they want to be abstinent, but they want to still continue their drug. And those things are actually mutually exclusive. They're like, okay, well, I'll give up white sugar, but how about coconut sugar? How about agave? How about monk fruit? How about lohan? How about stevia? It doesn't work like that. If you're an alcoholic, you can't just stop drinking vodka. You also have to stop wine and beer. Sugar is sugar. Flour is flour. And if you have food addiction and are susceptible and vulnerable to them, none. People don't like to be told no.
Okay. So, but despite the fact that people don't like to be told no, you're still being quite successful in the professional world. So where would you give your...
ChefAJ.com. Chef AJ, just go to my name, ChefAJ.com, and we do fun things all the time, classes.
Okay. So it's the fun stuff. Okay, last question, Chef AJ, because you've been great. I don't want to take up too much time.
I can talk to you all day.
What would you tell your younger self about food addiction?
Oh, that it's real. I remember when it was before the age of 25, and I was going to the best doctor in LA. He was even voted by LA Magazine, and I was having blood sugar issues. So he ordered something called a 6-hour glucose tolerance test.
Yes, I remember.
And the carb load before, and he says, listen, you're going to have to eat like a lot of food, got to eat like a lot of processed food. You need like extra couple thousand calories before this test for it to be accurate. And so he sends me off, and I remember going to this bakery called Webby's on the corner of Laurel Canyon and Ventura, it's not there, and ordering like my favorite cake, like that I would normally get for my birthday cake. It was a golden cake with fudge filling and purple flowers. And I remember just like eating the whole thing. And I'm thinking, this is weird that like I can eat this entire birthday cake for myself and it's not hard. And I remember saying to him, I think maybe I have a problem with sugar. Oh, no, you don't. And I would tell my younger self that, yeah, sugar is not a food. It's a drug. Stay away from it. And anything white, pretty much, except for maybe cauliflower and jicama and potatoes, are poison. So, I mean, I didn't know. I felt like there was something wrong that I could eat that much sugar and actually just like, hey, this is kind of cool. Like, I would just tell myself, this is not food. It's not food. It's not your food for sure. Stay away. But also tell myself, hey, recovery is possible. Things are going to get a lot better.
Okay, but what about now? This is a Halloween summit. So what would you tell that younger self on Halloween, looking at all those things that you're now telling yourself, you don't want to eat that?
Send it to the troops or give it. Nowadays, dentists take it and give you money. So I would say, I'll take the money. I'll take the money.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Chef A, for your time on this Food Junkies Summit. And for those of you listening, the ultimate message is Halloween is let's have a sugar-free Halloween. Thank you, Chef AJ.
It's funny. Halloween is when I start something called 63 Days of Abstinence. And even people that are not sugar-free, I enroll people to be abstinent from sugar and flour and alcohol for the 63 days from Halloween to January 1st, because that is the most critical time. Because when people slip and relapse during that holiday period, they go down, down, down. They gain weight that they never take off. So I'm all for you. Starting with Halloween is the best day.
All right. Thank you so much. All right. Cheers.
Thanks for joining us today on the Food Junkies Food Addiction Summit.
If you would like to hear more, tune in every Friday to the Food Junkies podcast, available on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, Audible, and anywhere else you listen to your favorite podcast. Subscribe so you'll never miss a show.
Don't forget to pick up a copy of Dr. Tarman's book, Food Junkies, which is available on Amazon.
If you have any additional questions, both Molly and Clarissa are food addiction professionals and work one-on-one with clients. Their websites and email addresses are available at foodjunkiespodcast.com.
As Vera always says, the power is ours.